day. Welcome everyone to this launch of the Nordic Asian Venture Alliance. My name is Peter Johansson. I am the project manager of NAVA, as it will be called. So today it's also going to be about Asian and East Asian venture capital, on how to attract East Asian venture capital and limited partners to the Nordic ecosystem. And to that event, I have been so lucky to introduce, I can introduce later on, the three companies, the three people that have best managed to attract Asian or Japanese LPs to the Nordics. I'll introduce you guys later, but it's byFounders, Nordic Ninja, and Tera Ventures from Denmark, the Nordics, and Estonia. So, first of all, before I jump into the panel discussion that will be following this short introduction, I'd like to launch and introduce the Nordic Asian Venture Alliance, which is a very new initiative. So, the purpose of the Nordic Asian Venture Alliance is, in all simplicity, to increase the level of Japanese, Korean, and Chinese investments and capital into the Nordic ecosystem, either by direct investments into startups or as LPs, limited partners, joining a foundation or as VC in the Nordics. This, of course, would be the preferred route to go, if possible. And the overall vision of the project is to address two basic challenges in the Danish, especially, ecosystem. One is that Danish startups, especially, struggle to raise larger rounds, A rounds and upwards, and often, therefore, the most successful of these Danish startups, they end up raising rounds with US and UK venture capital funds, and therefore, they often also ended up by moving their headquarters and scaling to these destinations, which of course is a disadvantage for the entire Danish ecosystem. The second challenge is that, in my opinion at least, is that many Danish startups, they struggle or totally ignore the opportunities in East Asia, which are huge markets. And that's a shame, and not just because these markets are huge, but also because many of the solutions that Danish startups provide, and also Nordic startups provide, they are very well suited for the East Asian markets due to many of the same societal issues that we have in the Nordics. But I'll get back to that later. So, this project, which is funded by the Danish Industry Foundation, very much builds on the lessons learned of the Innovation Lab Asia project, which is an initiative that started 3 years ago. It was a collaboration between TechBBQ Asia House and the Danish Innovation Center and Copenhagen Capacity also joined in to explore these East Asian or Asian ecosystems in general. And we've made this little booklet here where we have condensed and distilled all our learnings from 3 years in a very neat little booklet. It's not one of your average 70-page McKinsey reports that rarely are read except by academics. This is easy to go to, so I can only encourage you to take a look. But basically, the NAVA project builds on Innovation Lab Asia, on some key takeaways and insights. And these are the insights I'd like just to introduce to you quickly. And one of the insights is that, that Japanese, and we focused mainly on the Japanese ecosystem in the Innovation Lab Asia. Now we're expanding to Korea and China. But in the ILA project, we focused on Japanese investments, and we saw there was a marked increase in investments going from Japan to the Nordics, exponential rise basically. And the reason for this is twofold. First of all, there is a Nordic pull that many Japanese investors, they see the Nordics as particularly transparent, politically stable, economically affluent, attractive destinations to go to as investors. And also, again, many of the solutions that they look for are developed by Nordic startups. The second one is a Japanese push, basically, which is that the Japanese ecosystem in general is still quite nascent, and therefore many Japanese funds, they look abroad for international and global opportunities.
So what is the currency? Sorry, it's 22.
Now this is a number of investments.
A number?
Yes, number of investments. So here we have compiled all these investments onto which countries have achieved what, which startups and which Japanese investors have engaged as it acquisition, investment, limited partners, so on. And the basic takeaway from this is that Finland and Estonia are really leading the pack. They are extremely successful in what they're doing. Estonia is by far the most successful compared to the fact that there's just 1.3 million people. And Denmark isn't doing quite as good as it should, one might say. And this is also the motivation for this project, to work Nordic, to leverage our Nordic capacity and insights and network in order to increase the general inflow of venture capital to the Nordics. Because no Nordic country, perhaps except Estonia, is large enough to engage in Asia on themselves. So one of the things we experienced when we were engaging with Japanese investors were they're always asking questions about which startups are there, who can we invest in, which startups are good. And we were not able to answer that question. So we decided to make 3 sector reports, as you see here, urban tech, fintech, and health tech, where we showcased at all 73 startups for Japanese environments or public. And we translated the whole lot into Japanese, which may seem like a banal thing to do, but nonetheless, nobody has done it before, showcasing Nordic startups in Japanese language. And this was a huge success. It was, of course, a difficult thing to find the pipeline for these startups, but here we had valuable help from the large cluster organizations like FinTech Copenhagen, Health Tech Hub, Blocks Hub, and Urban Tech Accelerator, and also all the Nordic hubs across. So what we did was we basically, here's one, Radiobotics, which you probably know, health tech company, Danish, where we made a standard description of the company. And what we did, because what I find, and maybe it's just because I'm an old boomer, I don't understand things, but when I read about startups, I have a hard time understanding exactly what they do. So if that's the case for me, I'm sure it's also the case for at least some of the investors. So we went and we basically translated what they're doing into language that everybody could understand. First stating what's the problem, then how do they solve it, why is it relevant in Asia, and finally, what are their ambitions in Asia and Japan. So this was the methodology we went all the way through, and we also added a video pitch, and this we all translated into Japanese language with Japanese subtitles. Again, this was a huge success. It had not been seen before, and in a very short time, with only 3 events in all Japanese as well, with good Japanese partners, we were able to generate 24 investment leads. So this was and is the basis for this project that we will be creating now, a digital platform for 200 Nordic startups to be showcased free of charge in 4 different languages: English, Japanese, Korean, and Chinese, accessible by Asian investors as a showcase room for what is available in the Nordics. Basically, trying to motivate Asian investors to look towards the Nordics. So this is where we're heading. Of course, we need the help of the investor community in order to do this as well. And I better keep an eye on the watch here, so I don't spend too much time. These are some of the partners we had in Japan. We're happy to have started an official partnership with Jetro. We've been working with TMG, Rainmaking, Plug and Play. Nordic Innovation House is one of our favorite partners. So, and this really helps also to gain the traction and the authority on the Japanese market. So basically, and the reason why we are standing here today, at least from the NAVA point of view, is to encourage startups who are looking for exposure in Asia to connect with us. We can do this free of charge. We do understand that startups are busy people, and therefore we have learned to not disturb these startups, just to disturb them as little as possible, basically. We do all the writing, we present the writing to the startups, they say yes or no, or change a bit, we go back, we put up a graphic design, they approve this, and then we publish it. So really, they don't have to do very much at all, because otherwise, nothing is going to happen, because the startups do what they're good at, namely their own products. And we will do what we're good at. We also are interested in connecting with Nordic investors who want to connect with other Nordic peers who have interest in Asia. We believe that there is a huge knowledge amongst Nordic investors about Asia, but it's very fragmented, and we'd like to collect this and consolidate this information between the stakeholders. We can help each other, basically. And then finally, we're looking for Nordic investors looking to connect with East Asian investors and limited partners. And of course, as always, we want to work closely with community partners in order to source the companies we need. And here, for the sake of our Asian stakeholders, written in Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, because we do truly believe that the only way to connect with Asia is to speak the language you speak there as well. So that was basically it for me. The partners of NAVA is Asia House TechBBQ, Copenhagen Capacity and Innovation Center Denmark in Shanghai, Seoul. We're funded by the Danish Industry Foundation, which gives us the luxury of being free of charge and altruistic. It's a very Danish setup, but we are Nordic at heart. We believe that it's in everyone's interest to work Nordic in order to access Asia, and Asia is definitely not a zero-sum game. And if you have any more contact, feel free to contact me at any time or sign up on nordicasian.vc. There is a contact formula there where you can sign up if you want to be in dialogue with us. Or you can join the party tomorrow at the Open Bar, just around the corner, 1700. It's a very basic networking arrangement. There will be free beer to some extent at least. And there will be a quick quiz, a bar quiz on Japanese trivia. And it's basically just networking. I will not be speaking as much as I'm doing here, so don't worry about it. You can search for Japan Trivia Night on Eventbrite. There is a sign-up required, otherwise too many people will be joining. We haven't got room for that. So that's it from my side. And now I have the pleasure of introducing the three panelists. You can stand up here.
Here?
Yes, please sit there, it's fine. Should I sit down as well? Yeah, I will sit down. So, as mentioned shortly before, we've been so lucky to collect the three most successful VC companies in the Nordics, the only ones, I think, to my knowledge, who've been able to attract Japanese limited partners, and therefore an extremely great opportunity for NAVA and perhaps the rest of you to understand what is the journey, how have you succeeded, what can we learn from all this. And here on the extreme right, we have Tommy from byFounders and Danish setup, and then we have Andrus Ox, Tera Ventures from Estonia, and Shin from Nordic Ninja, Nordic.
Helsinki is okay.
Okay, Helsinki, yeah. So maybe we can start just with a short introduction of all of you, and then we can move on to the questions. So perhaps starting with you, Tommy.
Sure. My name is Tommy Andersen. I'm one of the partners of byFounders, which is a Nordic fund, or new Nordic, you could call it. We invest in the Nordics and in the Baltics, in that geographical territory, or with Nordic founders globally. So we can invest in the US or in Europe or in Asia, as long as there's Nordic founders involved in that. And we invest in technology companies, some of the ones that you saw up there. And we have limited partners from the Nordic region and Europe and from Japan in our fund. 4-year-old fund, first-time fund, just raising the next fund as we speak.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm Andrus. I'm a founding partner of Tera Ventures. We're Tallinn-based seed funds. We also invest in New Nordics, plus Poland, Czech Republic. We're generalists. We like some themes more than others. We've been investing in this AI machine learning for more than a decade. And the other point is that, well, as we are hands-on, as some of our portfolio companies mature, we get to learn about their industries. And yeah, for that reason, we like fintech more. We like automation, last mile, a few others. On this fundraise side, so we just concluded the second fundraise, 45 million euros, and well, obviously most of that is in dry powder. We also invest here in Denmark now. Haven't done a single deal, but very eager to look at everything cool. Yeah, and well, the process of fundraise obviously was not very inspiring in general. So, but we figured out that, well, if you get to the right in LPs, then this can be like really great experience. And yeah, part of this topic overlaps here significantly. So, yeah, those Japanese LP conversations that we've had, I mean, really great, and it's truly value adding as well. So it's not just money. Obviously, these guys can really help in many ways.
Thanks a lot. Shin?
Hi, I'm Shinichi Nikuni, originally from Hiroshima, Japan, but now living in Helsinki, Finland for more than 2.5 years. And quite similar story actually like Tommy, because we also did the first fund that established in actually 3 years ago, almost 2019 early January. But yeah, then we are investing in exactly new Nordics and the technology companies, especially we call us as like kind of the largest deep tech, Japanese deep tech fund in Europe. Then we have 100 million euro. We are mainly investing in A, Series B, and primarily we are mainly interested in mobility, health tech, digital health, and VR, or other kind of digital infrastructures. Sorry. Then for our limited partners, so we have, in that sense, uniqueness, we succeeded in raising from the large classic corporates of Japan, such as Panasonic, Honda, and Omron. Also we are supported by the Japanese governmental bank called the JBIC, Japan Bank for International Corporation. But even though we raise those capital from the public and corporate side, we are quite plain vanilla VC. In a sense, we have Japanese and Nordic Baltic investment team located all in Tallinn, Stockholm, or Helsinki, and managing all the fund activities here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I guess I'll be asking some questions, and eventually we can open up with the floor as well. If there are questions amongst all of you, then we'd be happy to hear them as well. So the first, I guess, obvious question is, why Asia? I mean, why is Asia interesting for VC organizations like yourselves?
Well, certainly it's a large market, right? So, and it's, historically the startups from our region are actually, oriented to US, really. So, and this is still the main theme for us as well. So, most of the co-investors we actually have from East Coast. So, but obviously it is really becoming a global village. So, so you need to address other markets as well. And Japan, in particular, I think for us here is the best partner actually. So, and personally, so for me it started when Rakuten bought one of my portfolio companies and invested into another one, and we're having board meetings of that company, Linguist, in Tokyo. And obviously, besides enjoying the food and culture and nightlife, I've built a proper portfolio of network of local investors and other people as well. Yeah, so.
Okay, so it's large.
I think from our point of view, it's been the question that, we invest with a 10-year time frame. And, within those 10 years, we have to create really valuable companies. And you can't ignore Asia as, being part of that value creation. So as to your point, I think, most Nordic companies have been traditionally focused on the Nordics and on the US. But you have to include Asia, in general, in that value prop. So I think we have Japanese LPs in, and they provide, a cultural background, cultural understanding, access to a network in Asia as well. And and Japan is, I think, the most stable, and most, open, to Nordic culture as well. So that relation has been super helpful in lifting us into those markets, I would say. So we use it for providing access for the portfolio companies, and we use it as an information source for us in the Asian markets. That's what we use it for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe I can add from different perspective from Japan, because when we started this idea of this Nordic and venture capital from Japan, so it's actually in 2017, there's not much initiatives like this before. Then there's only a few like a cutting edge business person really understand what's happening in Nordics, but other people they don't fully understand. But in the early 2010s, the Japanese corporate started heavily investing in the first domestic VCs, also domestic startups. Then they learned this is really important for their innovations. Then they of course they started from the Silicon Valley first. Of course, then they are kind of mentally near in a sense. But they realized after later 2010s, they have been realizing that okay, Silicon Valley is not the only place they should invest. Then they are starting looking to the Europe side. Then I think we maybe just grab that opportunity from Japan.
That's interesting what you say, because is the Nordics, does it have any special position in a Japanese uptake, or is it just one region amongst many regions in Europe and the US? How are we positioned from a Japanese perspective?
It's quite a good question. And in general, I think the Nordics has a very kind of positive image in terms of like being consumer brands or like a kind of lifestyle culture. That comes first, but there's less connection in terms of technologies. Okay. But when you see that like a Spotify case is one example, then there's more cases are coming on, the unicorns are coming on. Then people are really getting into the so okay, there's more nothing, just more than the movie in a sense. Moving everything. There's something serious is going on here and there. So
is it that there is an interest and there's a positive attitude towards the Nordics, but there lacks the connectivity, the hooks, so to speak?
Exactly.
Okay. Any reflections on that? Is that also your...
So we certainly see that quite a bit. So many of the large Japanese companies have been visiting us with large delegations as well, and they're like openly saying that we need help to do the digital transformation of our own corporations. So and they believe that and rightly so, they believe that our region actually is the digitally most advanced region anywhere in the world. So and that's the main point here, really. Yeah,
So what kind of help do the Japanese investors and LP need in order to access? And here I'm thinking, of course, again about how can we help at NABA in doing this? I mean, what is needed from an organizational point of view?
I think you have to divide the money that you're looking at. So from an LP perspective, most of them just trying to diversify their portfolios. So they want to invest globally, and the Nordic as a region is an interesting region as part of diversification of where they put their money. That's from the LP perspective. That's why they put money in us, because we become the radar for the investments that they can do in the Nordics. That's a venture fund is another thing, because they already have a mandate to invest in distinct companies. So they will probably look to like co-invest with us, again, us providing some kind of insight and access and network, and hooks into the ecosystem that they can then, bolt onto and co-invest with us as a fund. And then the third perspective is the startups that are here that, are looking to go the other way and say, how do I get access to a Japanese market or the wider, Asian market, probably again, connect to someone that is already, networked in that space. Could be a venture fund, could be a cooperation between what we do, and then in that way hook, into those areas. So I think it kind of depends on the perspective of what kind of money are you looking at, and how they connect to the ecosystems.
Exactly, it's the same situation with us, and the fact that they are invested here means that they are really committed to the ecosystem. So the way we work, this morning I had a call with one of those LPs in our fund. So when we are having those periodic calls and we are reviewing the relevant deal flow for them. So it's like they are constantly scanning the whole space here, which is great news for this ecosystem here, because they really want to do deals here for exactly 10 or more years. So it's and I think it's just the start of it. There will be more of such investments here.
And another thing that is quite unique about Nordic Ninja is that the LPs are actually industrial conglomerates. So it's not just financial institutions, it's actually, industrial companies putting money into a venture fund that then invests in other technology companies, on startups and scale-ups instead. So I think for that, it's more like, industrial complexes that want access to new technology to actually integrate into their own businesses as well. So I think it's a financial, proposition, but it's also an industrial proposition that goes together in that fund, which is like not really, we have a lot of pension money, which is completely different. It's passive money, and no one cares really, what it goes into. Whereas I think the LPs that you have actually care, what do we invest in? Can we provide that access to Japan? Can we use that technology we get access through the fund in our own corporations? So I think it's quite a different, LP structure that you have, and a very interesting one.
Exactly. Yep. Maybe it's quite similar to the Tera venture Andrus is doing. So we are quite kind of that tech scouting function we are having in a sense, because we introduce more than we invest, because we have invested the 14 companies so far, but we have introduced more than 100 companies to those LPs, because they are, for them, this is new Nordic is a very interesting place, but it is hard for them to create a new branch, like a new resource allocation is a bit hard, but they invested in the VC like us and like you to get more like a wider network so that they can scout and hook up good companies.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a wider perspective. I mean, we know that in Japan, the majority of the VCs are CVCs. I mean, they have, compared to what we see in Europe and the US. And these CVCs, they have more of a strategic outlook than they have a financial outlook, and looking for technology, so to speak. So they use the LPs not just as an instrument to invest, but also just tech scout is a conclusion we have here.
An M&A scout.
Exactly.
Because in the end, CVCs used to be and still is quite a lot about, so I invest, I look at it, I develop, and I acquire.
Yes.
That is like the normal route for a CVC, how they invest typically. And I think that maybe goes for some of your portfolios as well. You're going to end up buying the stuff from a Japanese perspective out of their portfolio and maybe just acquire it. So that's another perspective again.
And that's what we also saw from the plans we made about the Nordics, that especially in Denmark, many of the companies were acquired actually. They're not invested in. Majority, I think 80% are acquired eventually. Though of course that's a different percentage in Finland, Estonia.
I think also the normal venture model is like a 10-year outlook, whereas I think most CVCs have like much longer. I mean, we invest, we develop, we do joint ventures, and if 10 years go past, fine, we just continue. So it's not about getting an exit; it's about establishing a long-term relationship, and that. So I think for that, it's almost like an evergreen fund and not just a venture fund. That most the thinking about what they do, right?
But on the other hand, we are trying to be kind of not be like a CVC instead. So, for example, we facilitate a collaboration. Like, for example, even though we have an LP, Honda as an LP, we facilitate some communication with the other OEMs. I don't mention name, but and because once invested, our first kind of fiduciary duty, kind of our mission is basically to make a greatest return out of our investment. So that is not kind of similar to the normal CVC in a sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if we look at then, does it affect the potential Nordic partners, VCs, that this role in general is more of a scouting function, or not just, but also a scouting function compared to perhaps others? Do that make Nordic VCs less open towards collaboration with Japanese, or more, or how does that work?
I think it depends on how much money you're actually getting from the Japanese LP. So they own like less than 5% of the fund. So that's more like access, network, ecosystem, look into the ecosystem, right? Whereas some of the big LPs have more influence, right? So the size matters also in this respect, right? So and I'm cool with that. They use it as a scouting engine. I mean, that's fine. I mean, if they want to do that, that's fine, and they provide insight for me as well. So I take what I can from the relationship, and they take what they can get, right? So, but again, if they own like 30 or 40%, I would have to be like more, keen on helping them as an LP. So I think it kind of depends how much, what are they actually, the influence that they have.
Okay.
I agree with you, but I sort of think differently as well, because this is like a pretty unique value proposition. It's we're actually pitching that to our deal flow companies quite heavily. So and it is useful. So it's not just those few investments that can result from it. The commercial collaboration can be quite wide, and it's not just Japanese markets. Those conglomerates, they actually cover a large part of Asia or globe essentially. So it's very meaningful helpful. Yeah. So.
And that kind of brings me to the question of when you have a Japanese LP entering, and they invest into a Nordic startup, is there a requirement or that this startup should scale to the Asian market, or is it kind of hands-off, or where do we stand here? Do they have opinions about that?
So let me start maybe.
Yeah.
So we basically work for the best of the company, so we don't never force the company to go to Asia or go to Japan, but we can help via the Japanese networks to work in Europe. So most of the cases actually we start from like a European project with like a Japanese network, because sometimes there's language barrier, regulation barrier in Japan, so in most of the cases it is much easier to start something in Europe than Japan.
I think from our side, we have ongoing discussions with the LPs. What are their interests? What are they looking for? What do they see from their perspective? And out of those discussions comes some mandates around what do we invest in. So I think the Japanese LP has the same influence as the other LPs that say, we're interested in this, could you look at this? And we take that into consideration once we look at the deal flow. But we would never enforce, as you say, that someone that we invest in should establish a headquarter or even a presence in Japan. That would be going beyond the LP commitment that they give. Yeah.
What about the startups then? Are they interested in, the ones that have received investments, the long list we have here, are they interested in scaling to Japan after does it kind of nudge them towards Japan or Asia, these companies?
Yeah, definitely, and it's actually more even beyond that. So it's not just those LPs that have invested. We've done many deals on portfolio company level with Japanese investors as well. So the interest is very clearly here. Yeah. So and by the way, it's not so difficult to actually get these guys. Many of them are actually here in Europe anyway. So you can run a normal fundraise process and will find them really. So you just need to think about Asian markets a bit. Yeah. So they will ask you, have you thought, and what's your approach to Asian markets? So yeah.
Because right now when you scan Eastern Asia or even Asia in general, there aren't that many startups out there. At least maybe I haven't looked the right places, but I haven't seen that many out there. So there's still, as compared to, say, the UK or the US, there is a general preference towards the traditional markets, I think. So, and that could be a motivation to, another reason to engage with Japanese and East Asian investors, I suppose, that they get access to this huge market out there.
I think one of the roles that we can play is like a catalyst to do that. Of course, there's a cultural difference, there's a language barrier, as you said, and there's stuff that just makes, and there's a long way. Yeah. In all fairness, it's on the other side of the globe, and it's not like traveling to Tallinn 1.5 hours away. So there is some problems to overcome, but that's what we can help with. We can provide some kind of bridge. We have people, we've got the networks, so at least they get some kind of starting point in doing so. So I think for that, if they tap into that, they can utilize it. Yeah. But still, you also have you need resources to do that. So you got to have certain size before you can overcome to do it, and then you would probably pick the low-hanging fruits first, which would be Europe and some instances US, before you then go to Asia. Yeah. So I think it has to do with that as well.
And now, before I open, sorry.
Yeah, one more thing. So with us, actually, it's easier because there is just one country in between Estonia and Japan. We're quite close.
A big one, though.
And I think many of the Japanese companies are thinking from the perspective that, what's the best place to actually start the entry to Europe? So I think, our region actually is very good for that as well. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's why we chose Helsinki and Tallinn and Stockholm. This triangle is the first place to go. Yeah, sorry for the copy.
Yeah, it's fine. So, but actually now that you mentioned culture, and as a final question before I open up for the public if they have any questions, but this question of culture, how does that affect, has that been an issue, or what have you experienced here? And here it's interesting because we have both sides of the perspective, I think, so that could be interesting. Maybe, Yushin, have you any?
Yeah, I think here everything, basically this is the very trust-based society, I feel, especially when in comparison with Japan. I don't mean that there's no trust in Japan, but I can explain a bit. So usually you start from trust, then you start with some trust somebody proposal, then try to get it something positive from out there. But in Japan, usually sometimes it takes time to build and obtain a good trust from especially from if you talk to corporate parts people, you get to understand who is a really key person, who is really trusting you back. But once this is established, this is more or less same, I think. But this is here, I feel it is much faster and quicker in a sense here. But what's your opinion?
No, but I think you're right. And I think, maybe we can say that, here, like on a societal perspective, it's a trust base, so from the outskirts, I believe in you. I believe in you have good, your intentions when I meet you. I think that's kind of the overall, the way that we work. Meaning that you don't have to spend 6 months with me before I start trusting you, unless you do something really bad, right? And that helps a lot in the business side because if that's the overall, I easily work with people. So I think from the LP perspective that we have, we've had some very polite Japanese investors, keen to tap into the network and keen to just get to know what is the Nordics, right? So I think at least for the first few years they were very hands off and please just provide us some insight and access to the ecosystem. Whereas now it's getting more like, okay, now we understand and now we want to assist, we want to provide some insight from our perspective as well, right? So I think it's changing now, but first it was very super polite and hands off and maybe that's the impression that we have from Japan as well. So they're very keen but polite also.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we have a lot of match from business culture and communication style perspective as well. So it feels like we're actually quite close. So yeah.
So before I have one more question, but before I ask that, are there any questions from the public? Anyone to ask questions? Yeah, please.
Ask, or you still have your question, or shall
no, I have my question in the backhand. So
yeah.
Okay.
Feel free to finish first.
No. Just please go ahead. It's okay.
Okay, let's be polite here as well. Good. Well, so thank you very much. I hope this is so Klaus Mikko, Nordic Ninja, and for the gents more or less now from the European perspective and Nordic perspective, how do you see that how did it come up to? What was the link and especially to inspire other funds in Europe to get Asian and special Japanese funding? So was it them approaching you approached them? What was the sales pitch for you to actually close that? And if you would like to elaborate a little bit also on the cultural elements we had the politeness and is there anything specific in the relation there that you would like to highlight as well?
So in our perspective, we're like two partners that founded the fund. And one of the partners, my colleague Eric, had an existing relationship actually to the LP, as part of his previous startup. So he established some of the trust that you're talking about. That was established between the two, not from a fund perspective, but from from a trust between a startup and them. Not their LP arm, but their venture arm. And that trust was then elevated to the fund level on our side and the kind of like the LP side on their side. So I think it was like moving closer and closer, and then the investment was made, right? I think it was obvious for us that we would like to have it again for the access of the startups primarily, and for us to get some insight from the LPs as to Japan and Asia in general, as like a part of the insight as we as a fund have, right, to the startups. So that's how we started, at least, yeah.
In my case, this Itochu investment happened because I just bumped into Akito, who visited us during Latitude 59. We didn't even schedule a meeting, so truly serendipitous moment. So, but we have actually done the whole Estonian ecosystem has done, I think, a lot of marketing towards Asia or Japan in particular. So we really believe that there should be a proper bridge. So, and the very catchy way of doing it is that, well, Estonia lives in the future. Well, if you want to see what will happen in the future, come and invest in us. And if you don't believe, you can come here, we'll prove it to you. So most of the people who have come over, we've actually converted as investors.
To catch them.
Yeah. Behind you. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much for sharing all the insights. Really interesting. I just wanted to ask you whether you see other kind of relevant industries coming into this relationship between the Nordics and Asia, because besides the fintech and the urban tech and the health tech, I see that there is maybe an emerging potential with climate tech and enviro tech, because at least in Europe you have all these non-financial standards that require you to report all these, what are your core business operations, but also the supply chains. But for me, it's kind of funny that they don't engage with the supply chains with producers in Asia and all these things, and they are reporting things that are really representing the core business operations or the supply chains that they have. And then when they take decisions based on or assess the risk and opportunities, maybe they haven't scratched their head and look at Asia. So in my opinion, I don't know, it might be something that is relevant coming up for these relationships between, well, at least the Nordics and Asia, engaging with with the manufacturers, factories, and etc.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think beyond the areas that you mentioned, we see that automation, robotics, 3D print, everything that revolves around distributed production has got a lot of interest as well. Because I think you're not going to have Asia as a production facility for eternity. See all the problems right now we have because of that. Supply chain wise, and access to materials and stuff like that. So I think that as an investment area is really getting hot, I would say, at least from my perspective.
It's interesting because when we look through all these investments happening, we try to kind of find a pattern. Do they Japanese investors like A or B or C? And we haven't really been able to nail that down. Do you have any comments on that? Are there any particular, now relating to what you said as well, are there any particular sectors or technologies that are, you say, that 3D print and the automation stuff,
robotics,
is that?
So January this year, Japan actually decided to become carbon neutral by 2050. And many of those large corporations actually contacted us saying that, well, we will now scout those opportunities. And we know that, well, Europe has been doing that for the longest amount of time. So we know that you have those deals. Give it to us.
Maybe I can emphasize this point. Maybe every single Japanese executive would think about climate neutrality or this carbon tech kind of things, carbon neutralization or everything. So this is becoming really a top agenda for the not necessarily in the manufacturing companies, but also for almost every single companies. They are really thinking about this is serious thing. And as Andrus said, basically, they understand Europe is way ahead in advance. So they really keen on learning from the Europe, especially. And I believe that this the new Nordic region is kind of further in advance in terms of within the Europe still. So I think there's much potential to collaborate in this aspect, I think.
Yeah. So in that notion, we have an additional advantage, at least in theory, that this technology, the emerging climate tech focus will probably, or carbon neutrality will be an advantage for us. Yeah, okay. How long have we got left? What about my last question? Okay, thanks. From the NAVA point of view, and now that we proceed to do this work we want to do, I'd like to hear from each of you very quickly, what do you think should be the main activity, or how can we best benefit this movement of Japanese and East Asian capital towards the Nordics? What should we do? Perhaps starting with you.
The last topic, which is climate goals. I mean, that's going to be the number one above and all. The theme that is going to run through all of our investments, a lot of the LPs investments, and in industrial corporations. So I think if you put that ahead, and make that the common denominator. There's a lot to talk about, what we have of knowledge, what Japanese are looking for, and investments. I think some of the best investments we can make is going to be in that area, because the problem is so big that the solutions to it are going to be hugely profitable. So I think that would be my point of view.
So basically identifying interesting startups within this realm, showcasing, informing, promoting around this narrative of...
And tie it to the 2050 goal. Okay. That would be, I think that would be above and beyond what I would do.
And you?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But as an investor, I already feel like those kind of climate tech startups in here is pretty busy, and they are receiving too many inquiries already. Maybe so if you can sort out these kind of things, then what is really relevant for these startups here, that could be really valuable. Maybe then on top, still a bit senior, like executive class of the people in Japan, they are still seeing is believing. So if you can have like some test bed, I mean Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, whatever, whichever place, whichever city, which is more accessible for the Japanese business people, that could be maybe of interest, because I don't know how often we can fly in Europe, because currently it is still quite difficult for them to fly, even though they want. So I see some there's a still gap of need.
So basically prototyping, demonstrating solutions for the executive class in Japan. Okay.
Yeah, from a startup perspective, I think it's pretty simple, really, or at least straightforward. So, you should really just think about Asian markets, or Japan in particular, and try to figure out what's your opportunities are. And that may sound hard as well, but talk to us. We can really help. From our perspective, it's sort of easy to see if it is a relevant proposition for those Japanese companies or market in general. So you just pay attention to it. It's not anything complicated, really. So.
Just do it, basically. Okay, well, on that note, just do it. I think we'll round off for today, and thank you very much for the three of you for helping out and providing insights. Maybe give a hand to everyone here. And